All right, good evening and welcome to tonight's live virtual program. I'm Amber from the Reference and Adult Services Department here at the library. Thank you for joining us this evening. I have a few housekeeping items to get through before we start the presentation. Tonight's program will run until 8 p.m. During the program, all attendees will be muted, so report any technical issues you may have in the chat. During the presentation, chat messages will only be visible to hosts and monitored by me. There will be a Q&A session after the presentation, so if you have a question, please enter it at the time in the chat and we'll address as many audience questions as we can before the program ends. Subtitles have been enabled for this program. If you want to turn these off, click the small arrow next to live transcript in the bottom menu bar and select hide subtitles. Tonight's program is being recorded and will be available to watch on the library and the League of Women Voters YouTube channels soon after this program. So without further ado, I'll turn things over to Ellen Lafferty to get us started.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I personally, Shirley and I would both like to thank the Howell Carnegie Library and especially our technology host, Amber Carnahan, for helping us bring this presentation to you tonight. Before the session begins, I want to make sure that you've received the handout that came with hopefully your email for this registration event. If not, it's also on the website. You don't have to have it, but it sure helps to have that language in front of you as we go through the proposals. We'll also be following this up with a PowerPoint, a PDF of the PowerPoint, and along with a really extensive list of web links for more information, for more resources you can look at, both the pro and the con supporters and opposers of these proposals. And so you'll have a big wide picture of what's out there. So right now, let me get this screen shared. Okay.
There you go.
And now let me stop my video. And Shirley and I would both like you to see the entire PowerPoint, and rather than our adorable faces as we go through. Good evening. My name is Ellen Lafferty, and I'm the president of the League of Women Voters of the Livingston County. And I'm joined with my fantastic co-host, our vice president, Shirley Jackson. We are presenting the League of Women Voters of Michigan's Education Fund Board and bringing you this brief overview about 3 of the statewide ballot proposals on the November 8th ballot. And because there is heightened interest in election security these days, we will also cover Michigan's election laws.
Well, good evening and welcome, everyone. Voters certainly have got they've already voiced multiple concerns about the 3 statewide ballot proposals and election security.
Oh, sorry about that. Yes, they have. They absolutely have. And we hopefully will provide you this information tonight and answer the questions you might have. Again, as I said, this presentation is brought to you by the League of Women Voters of Michigan's Education Fund. And this group works to register and provide voters with election information through our election resource, vote411.org. Our printed voter guides, which by the way, are at township offices and libraries right now, but they're going quickly. Our candidate forms, which you can see on our YouTube channel, and debates.
And remember, the League never supports or opposes candidates or political parties.
Again, this is an educational presentation. We are presenting both sides of the issues as best as possible. So Shirley, what is on the ballot?
Well, in addition to the 3 ballot proposals, there are several statewide offices, as you can see listed on this slide. There's the U.S. House of Representatives, governor, lieutenant governor.
Oh, I see the Secretary of State, Attorney General, a few openings in the Supreme Court. There's multiple university boards.
Yeah, plus senator and state representatives. So that's quite a list.
Yeah, it is. It's a lot to look at, and I want everybody to be prepared when they fill out that ballot, and that's why we're bringing you this presentation tonight. There are many communities who are going to have local offices and possibly local proposals on the ballot as well. And now it's a great time for a shameless plug for the League of Women Voters online voter guide. At the website vote411.org, you're going to be able to plug in your voting address and then see who is running for the multiple races and what proposals, both state, county, and local, that are going to be on your ballot. We'll talk about that more later in the presentation. So I don't know if folks know it. I'm in Brighton and I have 5 proposals already that I have to vote on my ballot that I wasn't aware of.
Well, I don't have quite that many living in Pinckney, but still, there's a lot on there. People understand that legislators, whether they sit in the House of Representatives or the Senate, they write bills, they hope they become law, and we all know it's a really long process, but Michigan's Constitution gives voters a few other ways to get laws enacted, and each of them involves the petition process.
Well, what's interesting is Michigan is one of only 24 states that allow citizens to initiate legislation through the petition process, even though the rules and timelines are a bit different for each type in our state.
Well, one such power is called legislative initiative, and it gives voters the right, if certain conditions are met, to initiate or start legislation. This could mean initiating new legislation or amending or repealing an existing law. But another such power by the voting public is to amend the Michigan Constitution via the petition process.
So there is probably a pretty big difference between writing or amending laws and amending the state constitution, isn't there?
Absolutely. The legislature can change laws, but nothing in the Constitution may be altered without the approval of the voters. Any action by the legislature to amend the Constitution must be placed on the ballot, and the general public gets the final say regardless of who initiated the constitutional amendment. And you need to know this, everyone, that all 3 statewide ballot proposals that Michiganders will be voting on will amend the state constitution. And they are transparency and term limits, which is listed on the slide here, promote the vote 2022, and reproductive freedom for all. And please note too, that if any of these passes, they go into effect 45 days after it was approved by the voters. It's not very long.
Not at all. So the first proposal on your ballot is titled 22.-1, Transparency in Term Limits. And again, if you have that handout, you can read it for yourself, all the actual language that's going to be on that ballot. So I'll start with that this proposal was placed on the ballot by a 2/3 vote of the Michigan legislature, and therefore no signatures were required.
So that's why we weren't asking voters to sign petitions for this proposal.
Absolutely. You didn't see this one on the streets this earlier in the spring this year. But what happened is that this proposed constitutional amendment, this is what it's going to do. It's going to require members of the legislature, governor, lieutenant governor, secretary of state, and the attorney general to file annual public financial disclosure reports after 2023, including assets, liabilities, income sources, future employment agreements, gifts, travel reimbursements, and positions held in organizations except for religious, social, and political organizations.
Wow. I see that it would require the legislature to implement, but not limit or restrict reporting requirements.
Yeah, they could still get their hands on it a little bit, but they can't mess with the full intent of the language. And they can replace the current term limits for state representatives and state senators with a 12-year total limit in any combination between the House and the Senate, except a person elected to the Senate in 2022 may be elected when the number of times allowed when that person becomes a candidate, should this proposal be adopted. Just to let you know, the entire wording for these constitutional amendments are available at the State Board of Canvassers website. And also, you see at the top, votersfortransparencyandtermlimits.com. You can see it on their site as well.
No, that's really good to know. So currently, Michigan's legislature has failed to pass any legislation regarding financial transparency for elected officials.
And there's been a few problems with financial transparency, especially this last spring. A lot of it made the news. So maybe it's time, but perhaps they think that there aren't term limits for the US Congress, even though there is for the presidency.
Yeah, to enact term limits in Washington, the US Constitution has to be amended.
Well, I can't see that happening. And I researched that today, and the US Constitution hasn't been amended since 1992, since the 27th Amendment was passed. So it's been a while, and no talk of it happening anytime soon. Michigan's current legislative term limits permit 3 terms in the House of Representatives, so it's 6 years, and 2 terms in the Senate, which is 8 years, for a total of 14 years.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to remember when you've got the term limits and how long each term serves, but Michigan has had term limits for over the last 30 years. They were adopted in 1992, like you said, by voters. And in the 1990s, numerous states adopted term limits for state offices. Federal offices were not included because it would have to be an amendment to the US Constitution. 15 states have term limits now, and Michigan is one of 5 states with lifetime limits. The 10 others have got limits on consecutive serving, but not lifetime serving.
So what we're going to do in this presentation, you'll see, is that we're going to talk about, for each amendment, what the supporters say about it, and then what the opponents say. So the supporters on this amendment say that Michigan and Ohio are the only 2 states. Idaho, I'm sorry, thank you for that. Michigan and Idaho are the only 2 states in the country that do not require personal financial disclosure by their state elected officials. And this is a major reason the Center for Public Integrity ranks the state of Michigan as 50th in the nation in transparency. The Michigan legislature has discussed various bills to require elected officials to report their finances, and so far, none have passed.
And we need to point out that there's some disclosures here, because if passed, beginning in 2024, elected state legislative and state executive officials must file annual financial disclosure reports on their income, assets, liabilities, gifts from lobbyists, positions held in certain organizations, and agreements on future employment with the Secretary of State.
And about these term limits, after 2022, persons could not be elected to terms in the Michigan House of Representatives or the Michigan Senate for terms that total more than 12 years. A person could serve 12 years in the Michigan Senate, 3 4-year terms, or 12 years in the Michigan House of Representatives, 6 2-year terms, or another combination of terms that do not exceed 12 years. A 12-year lifetime limit would keep the benefits of term limits, but would also allow House members to focus on the serious work of legislation in the chamber where they were elected. Gone would be the pressure after the current 6 years to immediately start seeking out their next position.
Now, those are some good points. And now here on this slide, we've got a list of some of the supporters of this proposal. And people you can see on the slide here, the League of Women Voters of Michigan and several other Michigan groups and associations, such as the Chamber of Commerce and Michigan's Manufacturers Association, they're on here. But please note that these are just some of the supporters.
Yeah, not all of them. So this is what the opponents say. Critics of the proposal have attacked the rapid vote that state lawmakers cast last May to place the measure on the November 8th ballot, calling it an ambush. They've argued that the proposal is drafted by politicians and lobbyists who make money off their connection to government. And probably the #1 opposition that you hear more and more is that some people just oppose term limits completely and would rather see them completely eliminated.
So here we have some of the opponents. They include term limits, defense fund, and US term limits. And the League of Women Voters of Michigan could only find these two.
And they could not find any organization that was opposed to just one, either financial side or the term limit side. It's pretty much they're opposed to the whole thing. There weren't any groups out there that were opposed to just one part of it.
That's good information.
Okay, now we have Promote the Vote of 2022. As you can see at the top, there's a website for it. And on this proposal, they turned in 669,972 signatures when only 425,059 were needed. This is a proposal to amend the state constitution to add provisions regarding elections. This proposed constitutional amendment would recognize the fundamental right to vote without harassing conduct, require military or overseas ballots to be counted if postmarked by election day, and provide voters the right to verify identity with a photo ID or a signed statement, which is currently the law.
Well, they also provide voters the right to a single application to vote absentee in all elections. So you don't have to keep applying for every single time you want to vote, and requires state-funded absentee ballot drop boxes and postage for absentee applications and ballots, and provide that only election officials may conduct post-election audits, in addition to requiring 9 days of early in-person voting.
And this has been a sticking point. Allow donations to fund elections, and these donations must be disclosed, fully disclosed. And finally, require that canvass boards certify election results based only on the official records of the votes cast. Should this proposal be adopted? Yes or no? And again, the entire wording of this proposal is on the canvasser's website, along with Promote the Vote 2022.
Well, here we are that people need to know that currently Michigan voters passed Promote the Vote in 2018. That's why we have Promote the Vote 2022. It's because it was passed back in 2018 but it was a different version, because that time we were allowed to now place many voting rights in the Michigan Constitution. And then Michigan has various laws regulating voting that can be changed by the legislature. But voting rights that are in the Michigan Constitution cannot be changed without a vote of the people. So that's important to remember.
An example of that, then second one is allow laws to regulate voting. For example, they just allow a 2-day allow clerk's offices to work on the absentee ballots by just opening them. They can't tabulate them, but any area precinct over 10,000 voters at least can now start opening those ballots.
That will cut down the amount of time tremendously.
Hopefully. Supporters say that passing Promote the Vote 2022 will help ensure every voice is heard and every vote is counted in every election, no matter what political party or candidate you support, where you live, or what you look like. Voting is critical to the integrity of our democracy, which is why our fundamental voting rights should be respected and protected in Michigan's Constitution. Promote the Vote 2022 would recognize the fundamental vote without harassing conduct.
And Promote the Vote 2022 will enhance election integrity and increase election security by modernizing how elections are administered to ensure every vote counts. So by voting yes, you can ensure our elections are fair, accurate, and secure, and that election results are determined based on the votes of Michigan citizens whose identity is verified prior to counting their vote, whether they are voting in person or by mail. Promote the Vote 2022 provides voters the right to verify their identity with a photo ID or signed statement, same as what we've got going on today.
And this will also make voting more convenient and accessible for Michiganders of all backgrounds. This amendment, this ballot initiative would require that military or overseas ballots would be counted if postmarked by election day, and also provides voters the right to a single application to vote absentee in all elections. In other words, you fill it out once and that's it, you're set.
And here we go with another list of supporters. And there's obviously opponents as well, but this is one is for supporters. Some of them include the League of Women Voters of Michigan, Voters Not Politicians, Michigan AFL-CIO, and others, as you can see here. And for a full list of supporters, you can go to promotethevote2022.com's website.
And here are the opponents. And they say that opponents claim the measure would open the door to abuse and have been opposed to wide expansions of absentee voting because of security and cost concerns. Another comment I read today, folks that are opposed to it, they feel that it's the legislator's job to take care of voting. But in a perfect world, when they worked across the aisle, that would happen. So it doesn't seem like that's the case.
Yeah, you're right. And you can read some of the names of some of the groups that are against this proposal, as you see on here. Secure My Vote, Stand Up Michigan. And once again, this is not a complete list, but there are obviously some opponents to this proposal.
And the third proposal, as you can see, the MichiganReproductiveFreedom.org is the website you can go to for more information on this. This is a proposal that, again, they turned in over 735,000 signatures when they only needed 425,059. This proposal would amend the state constitution to establish new individual right to reproductive freedom, including the right to make all decisions about pregnancy and abortion, allow the state to regulate abortion in some cases, and forbid persecution of individuals exercising their established right. This proposed amendment would establish new individual right to reproductive freedom, including the right to make and carry out all decisions about pregnancy, such as prenatal care, childbirth, postpartum care, contraception, sterilization, abortion, miscarriage management, and infertility.
Yeah, and it would allow the state to regulate abortion after fetal viability, but not prohibit if medically needed to protect a patient's excuse me, life or physical or mental health.
And again, I encourage you to look at the handout with this, where this is all listed, but we'll continue to go over it. It forbids the state from discrimination in enforcement of this right, prohibit prosecution of an individual or a person helping a pregnant individual for exercising the rights established by this amendment.
And it would invalidate state laws conflicting with this amendment. So should this proposal be adopted, yes or no?
And again, you can go to the State Board of Canvassers website or Reproductive Freedom for All's website. So currently, this is what the background is. Shirley, I'm going to let you take this on.
Okay. On June 24th, 2022, the U.S. Supreme Court overturned the landmark Roe v. Wade decision in a 6-3 vote. And almost half a century ago, the Roe v. Wade ruling was the basis for establishing a constitutional right to abortion. That's the Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization. The ruling means states must decide what the law will be regulating abortion in each state. And in Michigan, we have a 1931 law that bans abortions, but the courts have issued an injunction on that law. So abortions with certain restrictions are still allowed right now. In 2020, 18% of all pregnancies in Michigan resulted in an abortion and 15% in a miscarriage. Those under 18 years of age accounted for 2% of all abortions in Michigan.
Okay, and so the supporters are saying, why do we need this amendment? They're saying it's because of important medical decisions should be guided by a patient's health and well-being and not by a politician's belief. But for far too long, politicians across the country have been fighting to restrict reproductive health care. And now they're gaining ground. And now that the US Supreme Court has overturned Roe v. Wade, a 1931 Michigan law could go back into effect that would make abortion illegal and threaten doctors with prison for up to 15 years for providing an abortion. In addition to ensuring access to a broad range of reproductive health care, this amendment will make sure no one goes to prison for providing safe medical care.
And when people are able to make decisions about their own reproductive health care, including whether and when to have children, they have more control over their health and their economic security.
So specifically, this measure would ensure that all Michiganders have the right to safe and respectful care during birthing. Everyone has the right, excuse me, to use temporary or permanent birth control. Everyone has the right to continue or end a pregnancy pre-viability, and no one can be punished for having a miscarriage, stillbirth, or abortion.
Okay, so on this slide, take a look at the organizations listed here. The American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists and the Michigan Nurses Association are among the supporters. And once again, this is not a complete list. So take a couple of seconds to read through this.
The opponents, and one of the opponents listed on the right there is supportmichiganwomenandchildren.org. They're saying that this 1931 Michigan law that bans abortion except to save the life of the mother and makes it a felony to perform should be the law and should continue to be the law. Opponents also believe that this amendment would repeal dozens of state laws, including our state ban on tax-funded abortions and the partial birth abortion ban, and that it would fundamentally alter the parent-child relationship by preventing parents from having input on their child's health.
So here's our list of some of the opponents. Once again, this is not all of them, but it's interesting that just as the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists was listed as supporters, the American Association of Pro-Life Obstetricians and Gynecologists are against the proposal. So even people within the same occupation have different opinions.
Mm-hmm. So we know you have questions on these three proposals, but we're going to quickly go through the election process because that is also seems to need some clarification right now. There's a lot of misinformation out there. So we're going to talk about the three key factors, which are registering to vote, absentee voting, and certification of the election.
Okay, on this slide on register to vote, you can see on the left side of the screen, it says through 15th day before, which this year, that's October 24th. And during this time, there's many options on how to register to vote. You can do it by mail. You can do it in person through the Secretary of State's office, city or township clerk's office, or you can go to voter registration agencies and you can participate in a voter registration drive, or you can do it online. Now, take a look at the right side of the screen on the slide, and it says from the 14th day before, which is October 25th. So in other words, the day after what you see on the left, on the 25th, on the right, through election day at 8 p.m., there's only one option to register to vote, which is in person at the clerk's office or satellite office with proof of residency.
You also have the option of voting absentee, and don't forget, then promote the vote of 2018. Everyone can vote absentee, everyone. And so how you can do it in person, just to go visit your clerk's office, fill out the application right then and there. When you prove, your residency, you're going to receive, and you can stand there and vote that absentee ballot if you choose to, and turn it right back in. Or take that ballot home, complete it, and then drop it off in the drop boxes outside of all the clerk's offices, or just mail it back to your local clerk. You can also do it by mail, request that application through the mail, and you're going to be sent it again. Once that application is received by the clerk's office, they'll turn around and send you the ballot, complete it, and mail it back. You must sign the ballot envelope with your official signature in order for the ballot to count. And the ballots must be received by 8 p.m. on election day.
So why vote absentee? The advantages of absentee voting are no lines, busy people.
Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. No lines, busy people can vote when it's convenient. No rides are needed to get there. And there's time to study the choices. And when you've got a long ballot, boy, I really like that part. For the August,
oh, go ahead.
Okay, thanks. For the August primary in what we just had in 2022, State Elections Director Jonathan Brader said around 2.1 million voters participated in the election and slightly over half voted absentee.
All
That's
right.
a lot of people.
That's amazing. I think it's a new pattern here. I see a rising. Once the election is over, there's a county board of canvassers that are charged with certifying the election. There are 4 members of this board, 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans, and they all have staggered 4-year terms. They're appointed by the County Board of Commissioners from names supplied by the 2 political parties. Their job is to, within 14 days of the election, they are to meet and review the election paperwork from the precincts, certify the election results in the county, and they need a majority vote to certify, which is generally what should be 3 out of 4. And finally, they send this election certification report to the State Board of Canvassers. Just aside, we have watched these the County Board of Canvassers, and I can't imagine they would ever have less than 100% agreement of a majority vote to certify. These meetings are open to the public to observe, but not to participate. And league members across the state are getting ready to go to all these counties to observe these meetings and report any irregularities that might occur.
So looking at this one, the picture looks very similar to the one for County Board of Canvassers. And this one, though, is for the State Board of Canvassers. And they are obviously a step higher than those serving at the county level, but they look similar to the county board. Both the county and State Board of Canvassers consists of 4 members, 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans, with staggered 4-year terms. And 2 parties supplies names for both the county and the State Board of Canvassers, but at the state level, the suggested names are reported to the governor, who then decides who to appoint. And their duties are similar as well, although there are important differences, of course. And at the state level, the Board of Canvassers have up to 6 weeks after the election to meet and review election certification reports from the counties and certify the election results. And once again, with a majority to vote to certify, which is, like Ellen said, 3 out of 4. Like county boards, the State Board of Commissioner meetings are open to the public to observe, but not to participate. So if you go to watch, you are not allowed to say anything. But we will have our league members there. We've got a bunch of people getting ready to get signed up and trained and to observe the meetings. And we fill out a report after every portion of those meetings are done. You know, like if we go for a half a day or something, we fill out a report. Every single person does.
And I encourage everybody who watches this presentation to take the opportunity to go watch the the County Board of Canvassers right there in downtown Howell in the court building. And it's just a brilliant process. These folks are committed. They're fine-tuned, and their attention to detail can never be questioned. So I encourage you all, anyone to go watch this presentation. And finally, to sum up, we covered the 3 statewide proposals that will be on the ballot in November. We also talked about how to register to vote in Michigan, how absentee voting works in Michigan, and how elections get certified at the county and the state level. Here are a few of the sites we referred to during this presentation on the voting rights. And again, we're going to follow up with quite an extensive list in our follow-up email, including these and many more. So don't worry about writing these down.
So one last thing before we take questions, before you cast your ballot, we encourage you to check out the League's online voter guide, Vote 411. And by entering your voting address, not necessarily, where you live or whatever, but it's your voting address, you'll be able to learn about the candidates and issues in your district. So you go to www.vote411.org.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing right now and see if you have any questions. And anyone at that time, I'm not sure if questions were submitted in the chat.
I haven't seen any yet.
Yeah, I'm looking in the
Okay.
chat and I don't see any.
So anybody who's here tonight, if you'd like to just go ahead and ask your question, we're happy to answer it for you. And Shirley, would you put your video back on, if you don't mind?
Oh, okay. Yep.
And Amber, can we turn on everyone's audio and video? Is
Sure, I
that
can allow
still-
that.
Yeah, I think that needs to happen for
Mhm.
this Q&A to take place.
Sure.
So if we don't have any questions, does anybody have any comments that they'd like to share?
Again, this is an educational forum. There's going to be pros and cons on all 3 of these ballot proposals, and the League is not here tonight to take a position on any of these proposals. You, however, can go to the State League's website, lwvmi.org, to review the petition, the positions on all kinds of issues that are going on across the state, environment, the list goes on.
Looks like we have a comment from Janice saying, very informative, thank you.
Thank you.
And I've allowed, participants are now able to unmute themselves and start their video if they want, if anyone has any questions.
We did a great job, Shirley.
Sarah also
Again,
says thank you.
You're welcome. I just wanted to thank Amber again for hosting this presentation
Absolutely.
tonight. And again, this is going to be up on our YouTube channel, the recording, and it's going to go on to our Facebook. And please share it. We want voters, the League of Women Voters is committed to not only registering voters, but educating them on what's on their ballot. We don't support candidates or parties. We just want you to know what you're doing when you walk into that ballot booth, or sit down at home and complete that ballot at absentee voter ballot.
Okay.
All right. Do you have housekeeping things, Amber?
Yeah, so we can wrap up if there aren't any questions. Thank you so much for that wonderful presentation, and thank you all for attending tonight's program. We hope you enjoyed it. I will be sending a follow-up email probably before the end of this week that'll include a link to the YouTube recording, the PDF of the presentation slides, and a list of resources. So keep an eye out for that. I'm also going to share a link to our evaluation in the chat. And then I'll include this in the follow-up email as well, in case you don't have time to fill that up. And for future upcoming programs from the Howell County District Library, feel free to visit our website, www.howelllibrary.org. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you so much. Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.